Emily Carter never imagined her life would collapse so completely. At 37 years old, widowed and mother of two young children, she walked through the streets of downtown Chicago before sunrise, pulling a battered suitcase with one hand and holding her baby close with the other. Little Noah wheezed softly against her chest, his breathing shallow after another cold night. Beside her, Lily, 8 years old, tried to keep pace, her oversized jacket failing to protect her from the icy wind. For nearly a month, Emily and her children had been sleeping wherever they could, sometimes under the elevated tracks, sometimes in the corner of an all-night bus station. Shelters were always full. Every door seemed to close the moment she explained she had 2 kids with her. Emily once had a quiet, ordinary life. She rented a small apartment on the South Side, worked as a front desk assistant at a medical clinic, and believed stability, even if modest, would last. Everything changed after her husband, Mark, was killed in a construction accident. Medical bills drained their savings. Then came unpaid rent, job cuts, and the eviction notice taped to the door. Emily sold furniture, borrowed money, asked for help, but the fall was fast and unforgiving. On the streets, each day became a test of endurance and pride, especially in front of her children. That morning was colder than the rest. Noah's fever had worsened overnight, and his cough sounded deeper, more dangerous. Emily stopped near a closed coffee shop and searched her purse for loose change, hoping for something warm. Her fingers brushed against something solid and unfamiliar. She pulled it out slowly. It was an old metal card, heavier than it looked, engraved with numbers and symbols that meant nothing to her. Her chest tightened as a memory surfaced. The card had belonged to her grandfather, Henry Collins, a quiet man who worked most of his life on the railroads. Years ago, he handed it to Emily without ceremony, as if passing down an ordinary object. "Keep this safe," he told her calmly. "If life ever takes everything from you, this might help, but only use it when there's no other way." Emily smiled back then, thinking it was just one of his strange habits. After his death, the card stayed forgotten at the bottom of her bag, mixed with old photos and papers. Now, holding it in her freezing hand while her child struggled to breathe, it felt different, heavier, urgent. Lily tugged at her sleeve and asked where they were going. Emily looked up and noticed the tall glass building across the street, the headquarters of a well-known national bank. She did not know why her feet carried her in that direction. She only knew she could not keep walking in circles anymore. Maybe it was desperation, maybe instinct, or maybe it was a mother's love pushing her forward when strength was gone. Emily tightened her grip on the metal card, crossed the street, and stepped toward the entrance, unaware that this simple decision was about to change the course of their lives forever. As soon as Emily stepped inside the bank, the warmth hit her face, making her dizzy for a moment. The lobby was wide and polished, filled with people in tailored coats moving quickly from one desk to another. Emily felt painfully out of place. Her worn shoes squeaked softly against the marble floor, and she instinctively pulled Noah closer, trying to shield him from curious glances. A security guard approached and asked if she needed assistance. Emily explained that she needed information about something her grandfather had left behind. When he asked for an account number, she shook her head and slowly pulled the metal card from her purse. The guard frowned, clearly doubtful, and another employee nearby suggested she visit a social services office instead. Emily felt her face burn with shame, but she refused to leave. She said her grandfather's name, Henry Collins, and asked them to please check, even if it seemed pointless. There was something steady in her voice despite the exhaustion. After a brief pause, the guard told her to wait near the elevators. They sat on a cold leather bench. Lily whispered that she was hungry. Emily brushed her hair back and promised food soon, though she had no idea how. While they waited, her mind drifted backward. She remembered her grandfather's small kitchen in Indiana, the sound of the radio, his slow movements, and the way he spoke about preparing for storms before the clouds appeared. Noah began to cry, his cough echoing through the quiet lobby. A well-dressed older woman passing by stopped, looked at the baby, and gently pressed a folded bill into Emily's hand, urging her to get him something warm. The kindness stung almost as much as the pity, and Emily thanked her with trembling lips. Not long after, the guard returned, his tone noticeably different. He asked Emily to follow him. They rode an elevator to an upper floor far removed from the busy lobby below. The space was quiet, lined with dark wood and glass walls. Inside a conference room, a man introduced himself as Thomas Reed, a senior account manager. He placed the metal card on the table and asked Emily to tell him everything. She spoke about Mark's death, the eviction, the nights spent hiding from the cold, and her fear of failing her children. Each word felt heavy, but she did not stop. Thomas listened carefully. Then he explained that the card was connected to an old contingency fund created decades earlier. To proceed, they needed to confirm Emily's identity. After a brief verification, the atmosphere shifted. Thomas took a breath and explained that the fund had been designed to activate only under extreme circumstances, when a direct descendant had lost all means of support. He did not mention the amount yet, but his serious expression made Emily's heart pound. He immediately arranged for food and water and called for a medical professional to examine Noah. Lily ate slowly, as if afraid someone would take the sandwich away. Emily watched it all in disbelief, struggling to understand how quickly things were changing. Finally, Thomas confirmed that the fund was real and still active. Her grandfather had planned everything long ago. What Emily could not yet imagine was how far this revelation would reach, or how fragile this sudden hope might be. When Thomas finally spoke about the value of the fund, Emily felt the room tilt. The number was far beyond anything she could comprehend. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. Only hours earlier, she had been counting coins on a frozen sidewalk. Now she was being told her grandfather had built a financial safety net large enough to change everything. Emily shook her head, insisting there had to be a mistake. Her grandfather never lived like a wealthy man. He drove an old car, repaired his own shoes, and never spoke of money. Thomas explained that Henry Collins had chosen a simple life on purpose. As a young man, he had experienced hunger and homelessness himself. That memory never left him. He invested quietly, patiently, determined that his family would never face the same despair. Arrangements were made immediately. A hotel room was booked for that night. A doctor confirmed that Noah had a respiratory infection that needed prompt treatment, and medication was provided on the spot. Lily ate until she could not finish her meal, something that had not happened in weeks. Yet comfort brought no peace. The hotel room felt unreal. The silence was unsettling. While her children slept in clean beds, Emily sat alone in the bathroom staring at her reflection. She barely recognized the exhausted woman looking back at her. Tears came without warning. She cried for Mark, for the life they had lost, for the nights she held her children close to keep them warm, and she cried from guilt. Guilt for surviving when so many others were still out there, unseen and unheard. On the table in the room, Emily noticed an envelope left by the bank. Inside was a handwritten letter from her grandfather. He wrote that the funds should only be used when all other options were gone. He reminded her that money could open doors, but character would decide what lay beyond them. He asked her to rebuild, protect her children, and remember those who were still struggling. The following morning, a financial advisor arrived to explain accounts, properties, and responsibilities. Emily nodded, but her thoughts drifted. Everything felt temporary, as if it could vanish at any moment. Her fear proved justified. A leak inside the bank reached the media. Headlines appeared about a homeless woman accessing a secret fortune. Reporters called. Strangers lingered near the hotel. Privacy disappeared overnight. Worse still, a senior executive questioned the legitimacy of the fund's release. Words like error and fraud were whispered. Part of the money was frozen while an investigation began. The panic Emily had known on the streets returned, sharper than before. The thought of losing everything again, just as her children were beginning to feel safe, broke her strength. This was the lowest point of her journey, and this time the fall felt even more brutal than the first. The investigation dragged on, turning days into restless nights. Emily slept lightly, waking at every sound, just as she had when they lived on the streets. She watched her children breathe, terrified that safety could be taken from them again without warning. Slowly, the truth surfaced. Thomas gathered decades-old records, signed agreements, and archived correspondence that clearly proved Henry Collins had created the fund legally and intentionally. The metal card was not symbolic, it was the final key to a system designed to protect his family only in moments of absolute collapse. It also came to light that the senior executive who raised objections had a personal history with Henry, rooted in a failed business dispute from years before. With the evidence complete, the bank closed the investigation, fully released the funds, and issued a formal apology. Media attention faded as quickly as it had arrived. The noise ended. For the first time in months, there was quiet. Emily chose to leave the hotel and start fresh. She rented a modest home in a calm neighborhood outside Chicago, close to a public school. Nothing extravagant, just stability. Lily returned to school with confidence, slowly returning to her smile. Noah recovered fully and soon began taking his first steps across the living room floor. But the greatest transformation was internal. Emily returned to the shelters that once turned her away. She found the outreach worker who had tried to help her and quietly began supporting families in crisis. She helped cover medical costs, temporary rent, and transportation, always anonymously, always respectfully. One afternoon, Emily recognized a woman on the street who had once shared food with her during the hardest days. Emily stopped, listened, and helped her find assistance. It was not charity, it was memory. One evening, Lily asked if they were rich now. Emily paused before answering. She said they had enough, and that having enough meant responsibility. Responsibility to remember where they came from and to never look away from suffering. Lily nodded and said she always felt safe even on the coldest nights because her mother never let go of her hand. Weeks later, Emily visited her grandfather's grave in Indiana. She placed simple flowers on the stone and spoke softly. She thanked him not just for the money, but for the lesson. Money was not the miracle. Compassion and dignity were the real inheritance. Stories like this remind us that life can change in an instant, that anyone can fall, and that sometimes help appears only when we reach the deepest point. If this story moved you, leave a comment and share your thoughts. Follow the channel for more powerful stories of resilience, hope, and second chances. The investigation stretched longer than Emily expected. Days blurred into restless nights. Even in a clean, warm room, her body refused to relax. She slept lightly, waking at every small sound, the habit carved into her during weeks on the streets. More than anything, she feared waking up to another loss. She watched Noah and Lily breathe, promising herself she would protect them no matter what happened. At the bank, Thomas refused to let the truth be buried. He searched through archived files, handwritten contracts, and legal records stored for decades. Each document told the same story. Henry Collins had created the fund intentionally, legally, and with a single condition. It could only be accessed if a direct descendant lost everything. The metal card was not symbolic, it was the final safeguard. As the review continued, another truth emerged. The executive who questioned the fund had once been involved in a failed partnership with Henry years earlier. Old resentment, not concern, had driven the accusation. When this was revealed, the argument collapsed. The bank formally ended the investigation, unlocked the funds in full, and issued a written apology. Media interest faded almost overnight. The reporters stopped calling, the strangers disappeared, silence returned, and this time it felt real. Emily left the hotel soon after. She chose a modest house in a quiet neighborhood outside Chicago, close to a public school in a small park. No gates, no luxury, just a safe place to rebuild. Lily returned to school, shy at first, then slowly smiling again. Noah recovered completely, his laughter filling the rooms as he learned to walk. But money was never the center of the change. Emily did not forget what it felt like to be invisible. She went back to the shelter she once stood outside of, holding her children in the cold. She found the outreach worker who had tried to help her before and began supporting families in crisis. Medical bills, temporary rent, transportation to job interviews, always quietly, always with respect. One afternoon, while stopped at a crosswalk, Emily recognized a woman who had once shared food with her during the hardest night she could remember. Emily pulled over, spoke with her, listened, and helped her find assistance. It was not generosity, it was shared history. One evening at home, Lily asked a simple question. She wanted to know if they were rich now. Emily thought carefully before answering. She said they had enough, and that having enough meant responsibility. Responsibility to remember where they came from. Responsibility to see people who are struggling and not look away. Lily nodded and said that even when they had nothing, she always felt safe because her mother never let go of her hand. Weeks later, Emily traveled to Indiana and visited her grandfather's grave. She placed a small bouquet of flowers on the stone and spoke softly. She thanked him for the foresight, but more than that, for the lesson. Money could change circumstances, but compassion shaped lives. Dignity was the true inheritance. Stories like this remind us how quickly life can turn. Anyone can fall. Anyone can lose everything, and sometimes hope appears only at the lowest point. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Follow the channel for more powerful stories about resilience, humanity, and second chances.